Hello buzzers, John here. I have it on good authority that lots of people are actually paying good money to insert kind of a watermark or copyright symbol or some kind of Joe Bloggs photography type logo on their pictures. Now, doing this is obviously useful if you're putting your pictures on social media. You want to identify that it's your work that you've done, but you don't have to go splashing out money to various companies to create logos for you, because you can do this really quickly and really easily yourself. All you need is Photoshop and the job is almost done, but let me show you how it works. Now, the first thing you need is your name. Now, you may choose to do this using an actual handwritten signature. If you have a graphics tablet like a Wacom or something like that, you can draw directly onto the screen. But if you don't have one of those, don't worry, because you can use a pen and paper. Just grab a sheet of A4, a black pen, and write your name. So I've done that, and then I've snapped a quick picture of the signature on the sheet of paper on my phone. I could have used a DSLR, but I was being a bit lazy, so I did it quite quickly. But a phone is actually fine for this kind of thing. Right, so we now need to open that picture of a handwritten signature into Photoshop. And to do that, just go to File, Open, and then I dragged it across to my desktop, so I'll find it there somewhere. There we go, that's my signature there, or Joe Bloggs, very imaginative, you see. And I'm going to click Open once I've got that selected. Right, so here it is in Photoshop and it's opened in a new window. We've got the image that I want to apply it to, but we're going to have it here. That's the picture of the signature that I've written. Now, it's the wrong way round at the moment, so we're just going to go to Image and choose Image Rotation, and then we're going to go 90 degrees counterclockwise just to get it the right way round. Now, what we need to do with this, you can see it's a bit grey, a bit murky, a bit unevenly lit. What we need to do is make sure that our ink is black and our paper is white. This is nice and quick to do, and you don't even need to use adjustment layers or anything like that. You can just open up the Levels panel to get this done. So to open Levels, you can go to Image and choose Adjustments and then go to Levels, or you can hit the shortcut Control or Command and L. That brings up the Levels panel on screen. Now, what we want to do is not mess about with the sliders. We're just going to use these eyedropper tools, because that will set a black point, that one will set a white point, and that will set a grey point. So all we need are the white and the black, really. So all I'm going to do is click on the black eyedropper and then zoom in a bit. I'm just using the scroll wheel on the mouse to zoom in. I'm going to click right on the black ink. That sets that as black. I'm now going to click on the white eyedropper. I'll zoom back and I'm going to pick the darkest part of the background. Now, I think that's probably down here by the looks of it, so I'll just click once on that, and that sets my paper as white and my ink as black. That's pretty much it done. So I can now click OK, and we have a nice black and white picture of that imaginative signature all sorted. Okay, what we now need to do is think about anything else we may want to add to our signature to turn it into a kind of a photography logo. You may want to leave it just as it is and just put your name on it, or you may want to have Joe Bloggs Photography. And if you go for photography, it's nice to have that in a more established font. So all we're going to do is use the Type tool to put that in. So we go over to the toolbox and we click on the T. Then all we have to do is click on the image roughly where we want it to appear. We can always move it afterwards, but I'll just click underneath the Joe Bloggs so I've got somewhere to put my words. And now all I'm going to do is type in photography. Now, it's looking rather small at the moment and it's grey, but we can change all of that. So I'm just going to double click on the letters themselves on screen, and then I want to change the colour to black first of all. So we'll go up to this little icon here, the Type Tools Tool Options bar, and we'll click on this color swatch and we'll drag that right down to the bottom left corner so it's black. We'll click OK, and that will change our text to black. We need to change the size of the text as well to match the size of our signature, and the easiest way is to click on this icon here. So click there and you'll get up the paragraph palette and the character palette. The paragraph one you don't really need. What we need is the character palette, and you'll see within this you've got your various font sizes and kerning and leading and tracking and all these kind of things. I've got the double T icon ticked, which gives me all caps. That's what I want. But if you didn't want that, you could simply uncheck that and you could have lowercase instead. But I'm going to go with uppercase here, and then to make my font bigger, I'm just going to mouse over this icon and you see a double-headed arrow. Once I've got that, I'm just going to slide it to the right, just mousing to the right while holding it down, and I grow the size of my font. While I'm doing that, I can also change the shape of it. I can affect the kerning, that's the distance between the characters, and maybe something like that would be good. And I can also make it fatter or thinner or stretch it around. And I think I'll go for something fairly standard. And the font I'm using here is Arial. The fonts you have on your system will be different to mine, but you'll find all the fonts you've got down there, and there are loads you can download for free online as well. So I'm just going to go for Arial, a very standard font which you should have, and that looks okay to me. So I'm happy with the way that looks. I'm now going to move it into position, and I think I could go for something like that so it's all centered, or I could move that into there so it's all part of it. Now let's go in the middle. Let's go underneath, something like that. So that can be my logo. Once I've got my word in the size I want it, the font I want it, and the position I want it, I'm just going to click up here on the Move tool to exit the Type tool and set it down. Now I can still move it around, I can still move that where I want it, and I think something like that, I think it looked alright where it was actually, just a little bit of space, that's it. If you want to nudge it into position, you can use the arrow keys or cursor keys on the keyboard. If you do it one tap at a time, up, down, left, right, you'll move it 1 pixel at a time, and if you hold down the Shift key and move it, it'll jump in 10 pixel increments. So you can kind of nudge it around to get it how you want it, and that's looking pretty good there. Now at the moment I've got a fairly massive file because it was taken on a 12 megapixel phone, this picture. So I'm first of all going to crop it down and then resize the image so it's more appropriate to be used as a brush, because that's what we're going to turn this into. So all I'm going to do is grab hold of the crop tool and I'm just going to crunch it down. I'm going to make sure I've got all the characters showing and make sure I don't have anything hanging over the edge, so I can crop as tight as I like. So something like that should be okay, and then I'll double click to set down those changes. What I'm going to do now is just resize that whole image so it's about 2,500 pixels wide. I don't need it any bigger than that for putting a signature on a photo. So I'm just going to go to Image, down to Image Size, and then I'm going to make sure that pixels are the units there. You've got all kinds of options from percent, centimeters, all sorts. Just go for pixels in that box, and then after locking the proportions to make sure that width and height go together, just set your width to about 2,500, something like that. It wasn't far off, it was 2,800 something, but 2,500 is quite big enough. So we'll click OK once that's done, and that'll resize the image. All I now have to do is make sure I've got that image selected. So once you've cropped it down, just hold down the Control or Command key, hit A, and that selects the whole image, and then you're going to go up to Edit and down to Define Brush Preset. Click on that and you'll get a little thing saying brush name. And all we'll do is call it, I don't know, photo logo. Let's call it something like that. Click OK. And then we can close this down. We're done with it. So I can simply click on the X, shut it down. I don't even need to save it. So it's now gone. And you see what's happened? That has been imported as a brush. And the beauty of that is it behaves exactly like any other brush. So if we look in our brush preset picker, which is this drop down here, you'll see right down at the bottom of your brush list, that'll be your normal view where you pick, say, a soft round or a hard round brush or whatever you may pick for normal use. Instead, we're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of that list and you'll see photo logo there. Click on that and you'll have your photo logo brush. And because it's a brush, you can make it any size you like. So I'll just click off the picture to close my brush preset picker, and then I can use the left or right square brackets keys to change the size of my brush. So if I go down by hitting the left square brackets key, I get a smaller brush. If I go up, I get a bigger brush. And I think it needs to go something like that. All we're seeing at the moment is an outline view. And as well as making it any size, we can also make it any color. So I'll go for that kind of size there. And then I've got to pick my color. At the moment, in the foreground color swatch, I've got gray selected, but of course I can have anything I like. If I click on the swatch, I can pick anything I want from the color picker, just move this slider here to change your colors, and then just click wherever you like to get the color you want. You'll see the color here, and then when you click OK, that color will be imported into the foreground color swatch and will be the color used as your brush. So I'm going to be rather traditional and go for white. So I'm just going to slide it up to the top corner, click OK, and that will set white as my foreground color swatch. If you want a really quick way of getting white as your foreground color, just hit D on the keyboard and then hit X to swap them over, and that gives you white as a foreground. So all I've got to do now is make sure I'm holding my mouse really still and then click once on the picture. And there we go. That's my watermark or my logo there. What you don't want to do is move the mouse when you click, because if you do, it's not going to look too great. So let me just undo that with Control or Command and Z. And if we zoom in, you can see that looks really nice and neat, and it's simply painted that signature in white onto my picture in one click. Now, I said you could use different colors. Of course you can. This is just a brush now. So we could click on that foreground color swatch if you wanted a yellow or something like that. We'll pick a yellow color, click OK. That imports yellow into the foreground color. And now when I click, I'll get that color instead. So we get a yellow signature. Just the same way, you could go for anything else. So maybe we go for a bold red instead, and we could click and get a red brush. But you get the picture. You can do whatever you like in terms of your color palette. But of course, with things like signatures and logos and watermarks, you really want to go for white on a dark picture or black on a bright picture. So that's how easy it is, but I want to show you a more refined way of doing it, which will stand you in better stead. Because at the moment, we've just got our background layer and we've painted clean over the top, and we don't want to do that. So I'm just going to hit Control or Command and Z and just undo those brushes I've applied. Instead of painting directly onto the document, what you really want to do is create a new layer first. So if your layers palette isn't on screen, go to Window and choose Layers from the list. That will make it pop up. Now what you want to do is click on this icon here, which is the Create a New Layer icon. Click on that and you get a brand new layer. It's not doing anything, but that layer, when it's active, is the best place to put your signature or your photographer's logo. So with it on a separate layer, we can then simply click and we have it separated from the image. I don't want it red actually, so I'm just going to undo that and I'm going to switch this back to white. So I'll click on this icon here or hit D and then hit this icon here or X. So once that's done, we're back to white and we can just drop that in wherever we want it to be. Now once you've done that, if you want a more subtle effect and want to kind of fade it down, you can really easily. All you've got to do is pop back, make sure your brush layer or your signature layer is active in the layers palette, so make sure you've clicked on it, and then just go to the opacity slider and pull it down. Go to 0 and it disappears completely, but a little way up and you can get a subtle sort of a rendition of your logo or signature like so. And that looks pretty good there at about 60%. So that's how easy it is to do a hand-drawn brush with a bit of typography as well, but you may want to do it all using the Type tool. And if you do, let me show you how that's done. Well, the first thing you want to do is create a brand new document. So don't worry about the image for the time being. Let's just pop up to File and choose New. And then in the new document interface, what we're going to do is create an image that's 2,500 pixels wide. So we go for 2500, height, 1000 would probably do, so we'll put 1000 pixels in height, 2500 in width, and then we'll click on Create. Now that's done, we simply want to write our name using whichever fonts we have that we like the look of. So what I'll do, I'll go to the Type tool, and I'm simply going to write Joe Bloggs. That will do. Now we can't see it, and the reason we can't see it is because I've typed a white color on a white piece of paper. But don't worry, just double click on that and it will be selected and you can change the color to whatever you like. So let's go for black. So we click on the swatch here and we select black from the color picker, click OK, and there's our blogs. We haven't got the Joe. Let me get the Joe as well. There it is, I missed it. So we'll change that to black as well. Okay, so we have our Joe Bloggs bit of type. I'll just move that roughly into the middle. And with this, we may want to have upper and lower case. So I'll just double click on the whole thing to make sure I've got it all selected. I'll make sure that double T icon isn't selected and that gives me my lower case. I can now use these dynamic controls just to sort out where my fonts go. That looks quite nice like that. Or maybe I want a different font for this one. Let's go for a different font for the Joe Bloggs and we'll go for a standard font for photography. So let's just see what fonts we've got. I'll click in the font box and just pick something else. How about Bradley Hand? Let's go for a handwritten font. That should do the job nicely. I'll just kern that in just a little bit, just bring it together. That's it. So there's my Joe Bloggs bit. Now I want to write photography underneath it. So all I'll do is click off the type tool, just click on the move tool momentarily, and then I can go back to the type tool and create another bit, and that's where I'm going to write photography. So I'll just write that in now. And if I want this bit in a different font, just the same process, double click on it to select the whole thing, and then choose the font you want. So this time we will go for a more standard one. Let's go for that Arial again, and we'll go for all caps on this one. So I'll click the double T icon to get that. Now it's too big at the moment, but ideally what I should be doing is working to my 2,500 pixel width. So instead I'm actually going to make the photography a bit bigger now. So let's just make that a bit bigger, maybe something like that. I'll kern it out slightly using the VA control. There we go, that'll do. Then I'll just move that roughly into position. That should be okay. And you'll see, because we've used two separate type tools, we've got two type layers. Now this one's just about done, so what I'll now do is go back to my Joe Bloggs type layer, double click on that to select the whole thing. That's another way of doing it, and then I need to make that a bit bigger. So I'll use the dynamic control, just slide that to the right until it's roughly the right width for my document, and I think something like that looks okay. Let's just move these palettes out the way so you can see what's going on. I'll close that one down. Okay, so we'll give that a little bit of a move to make sure we've got the whole thing in the document. And I think, yeah, that's looking okay there. And maybe we could put the photography in this little gap. That might work quite nicely as kind of a logo. So we'll go back to our photography logo, double click on that to select it. And then we can use the dynamic control on the font size in the character palette just to move it down to size. And that's the kind of thing there. Let's move that into position, a bit smaller. Yeah, something like that looks good. And perhaps we put it into that little gap. Yeah, that looks quite good as a logo. I'll go for that. I'll just click on the move tool. And that's my logo, Joe Bloggs Photography. That looks pretty good. So what I'm now going to do is make a selection of that. I don't need to flatten it or do any other things. I'm just going to grab the rectangular marquee tool, and then I'm just going to draw around that part of the image. So I just want to get tight to where the type actually is. Make sure I don't crop any of it off. That's good there. And once I've got that selection made, all I need to do is go to Edit and down to Define Brush Preset. That brings up the default name of sampled brush 1, but I want to change this, and I'll call it Joe 2. And you can see there that it's 2,322 pixels wide. It's actually measuring where we have our selection. So I'll click OK to that, and then I can close this down. All that work's been done, and I can just shut it down because I don't need it. Let's hit Don't Save as well. And there it's already been imported. I've gone straight to the brush tool, and I have my new logo in place that I've just created. If you want to look in the brush preset picker, again just click on it and you'll find it in the same place right down at the bottom of the list. So there's Joe 2, that's the photo logo I did first with the handwritten signature, but this is the one we're going to try now. So I'll double click on that brush, and then I can simply create a new layer. I can turn off this one, that's my original Joe Bloggs. Then I can size that down. Let's just hit the left square brackets key to bring that into size, and maybe something like that is what I'm after, and perhaps this goes in that corner. Before I apply it, I've got to think about what color I want, and again I'm going to go for white. Though of course remember, you can go for any color you like. So I'll just click once in that bottom corner, and there's my brand new logo, all assigned as a brush. And again, because I put it on a separate layer, I can then fade it down a little bit if I want to, just to give it a more subtle appearance on the print. Now that's all you need to know about creating logos, whether you're making them from fonts that exist on your system or making them from hand-drawn elements. But one final thing I'll do if you're feeling up for a bit of a challenge is I'll simply add a drop shadow to it. Let me just zoom in first of all on my Joe Bloggs photography bit. There's my logo there. What I'm going to do is bring up the layer style palette, and I can do this by clicking to the right of the layer name. So that's my Joe Bloggs logo, and if I double click to the right of that, I load up a rather large palette called Layer Style. Now I need to just juggle things around so I can see the Layer Style palette and also see the picture at the same time. So let's just move that up there a bit. There we go. Now all of these options do different things to the layer they're applied to. You've got bevel and emboss, contour, texture, stroke. You've got all kinds of stuff that adds different effects to the type or indeed anything else that you have in a layer. but generally speaking, the only one you tend to need is Drop Shadow, which is down at the bottom. If you click on the name Drop Shadow, it will both load up the Drop Shadow and it will tick the box at the same time. So there we have our Drop Shadow, and if you look at the image, you can just see a subtle Drop Shadow appearing in place. Now, to position it, you can move these sliders around, or you can simply click on the document and move it around. And you see there's the Drop Shadow lurking behind. And you can just move that into position kind of by eye and by using the mouse, rather than getting confused with all these sliders and what they're doing. You can change the color of the shadow, you can change the blending mode, but on the whole, a drop shadow should be black and the blend mode should be set to multiply. The opacity is the thing you'd normally change. If you put it up to full, you'll get quite a heavy drop shadow, and if you take it down to sort of 50 or 60%, that normally looks okay. Very much depends on whether the part of the image you've got your signature or your logo on is either bright or dark. But that's the only principle involved in drop shadows. Play around with the opacity of the drop shadow and the position of it, and when you're happy, just click OK. What you get in your layers panel then is an effects layer. There it is, the drop shadow. So you can still switch it on or off to see the before and after you've applied it. Just click on the eye icon alongside drop shadow and it disappears. Click it back again and it reappears. Now, it's not particularly clear on this dark area of the image, so what I'll do, I'll just bung it over the leaf for the time being so you can see more clearly what the drop shadow does. If I just click on the move tool, then I can make sure that layer 2 is selected and I'll just move the Joe Bloggs up. That will take the Joe Bloggs and the drop shadow with it. You can see there we've got quite a subtle drop shadow, but we can of course turn it on and off to see the difference it makes. And it helps just cut out the text. Now, you don't have to use a drop shadow on items like text, just check to see whether it looks better or worse with it. Sometimes you need one to help reinforce some text and other times you don't. But if you've got one applied, you can very easily assess that by simply switching it on and off. Alright, well that's a little bit extra with the drop shadow, not a necessary part, but what I'll do now is just move it down to the right place, which should be in this bottom corner on this image. It adds a little bit of balance there, and then I'll simply fade out the opacity a touch, just so it doesn't dominate the image in any bright way, but just sits there as a reminder that Joe Bloggs took this rather nice autumnal picture, a found still life, and we'll always know because his name's on it. Alright, well thanks for watching. Next week we want to bring you a little bit more about adding watermarks and signatures to your pictures, because you can do this in Lightroom as well. But that's enough for now. Create your brush with your signature or your logo on it, and enjoy finding some subtle ways just to add it to your pictures to give that extra professional touch. Alright, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.